Everyone's had a moment in their life when they realize that they've outgrown some of the things that they used to love. It's an important part of growing up that can be a little bittersweet, since it can feel like you're leaving a big part of your identity behind. But it can also be a point of pride, since moments like that make you realize how much you've grown as a person. I was about 13 when this happened to me for the first time. It was when I was starting to grow bored of media that was aimed at children. Kid shows and movies started to feel formulaic, and a lot of the jokes just stopped being funny. So once I started getting into anime due to my older brother introducing me to shows like Full Metal Alchemist, Mirai Nikki, and of course Attack on Titan, everything started feeling fresh again. Kids media tends to be very lighthearted, and it usually doesn't deal with heavier subjects like coping with the death of a loved one, for example. Finally, seeing heavier themes being explored in anime made me gravitate towards that medium in particular. Of course, there's also a lot of live action movies and TV shows that scratch that itch, but 13-year-old me didn't know anything other than the usual summer blockbusters. That's why anime felt like the only way to experience something more adult. And I got exactly what I was looking for with my brother's recommendations. All of these shows dealt with loss and senseless violence in some way or another, but Attack on Titan always stood out to me. It delivered on everything 13-year-old me wanted. A lot of violence so that I could prove to myself that I was mature enough to handle it, beautifully animated action, as well as cool characters that were a template for how I wanted to act when I was older. The second time I've had a moment like that was 4 years later, close to the release of Attack on Titan's second season. At that point I was a lot better at pointing out what exactly I liked and wanted from the media I engaged with. It wasn't just a vague feeling of depth anymore. Simply seeing violence wasn't enough to make me think of something as adult or deep, since I wanted these parts of the story to be explored in a meaningful way. Which is why I started viewing media through a very critical lens, which led to me taking a look back at what I used to consider deep or thought-provoking when I was younger, and what I found was kinda just meh. Shinsekai Yori or From the New World, for example, which was one of my favorites back then, seemed like it had a lot going on, since it really nailed that feeling of vague depth through its atmosphere and presentation, which was enough for my 13-year-old self to hold it in high regards. However, upon rewatching it I realized that a strong start and admittedly goated music was all that show had. Now, having realized that the approval of my 13-year-old self didn't really speak to a show's quality, I started going through all of my old favorites, and I made the horrifying realization that most of them weren't all that good. But surely, Attack on Titan would still hold up, right? It always made me feel so excited when I was younger, and there's no way that it would turn out just like Shinsekai Yori, Mirai Nikki, Another, and Gans. Well, after waiting for 4 long years, Season 2 was kinda disappointing to me. It only solved one of the major mysteries that were presented in Season 1 about the Colossal and Armored Titan, while also ending with an ass pull that made me worried that the resolution to questions like where do the Titans come from would also be something that comes out of nowhere with no prior setup, just like Season 2's finale. But it turns out that 17-year-old me just lacked patience, since the rest of the show not only addressed the issues that I had with Season 2, it also cemented Attack on Titan as one of my all-time favorites. So, now that I've watched Attack on Titan in its entirety, I thought of revisiting it to see if Season 1 is still as great as it was to me at 13, and to find out if Season 2 is really as meh as I remember, or if I was simply judging an entire story based on a small part of its runtime. Spoiler warning, yes, that's exactly what I was doing. I'll be going through one arc per video while commenting on the show's overall writing, characters, animation quality, world building, and foreshadowing, while also pointing out some stuff that you might have missed or forgotten about since the release of Season 1. 13 years ago. In addition to that, I will also be pointing out some of Attack on Titan's shortcomings. While I do love the show and would count it among my favorites, it is by no means perfect. Since nothing is perfect, and I believe that criticizing the things we love can in some cases even increase our appreciation for them, since being able to shine under extreme scrutiny like Attack on Titan does, in most cases at least, is a lot more impressive than something that falls apart as soon as you start thinking about it seriously. I'll be covering one arc per video, so this video will cover the Fall of Shiganshina, which is episode 1 and 2. The next one will cover Recovery of Mankind, which is episode 3 and 4, and I'll keep going like that till I'm done with season 1. I plan on covering the entire show like this, so stick around if you're interested, and shout out to Overanalyzing Avatar, Demolition D and Jacob Geller for inspiring me to do this. Attack on Titan, especially in season 1, has always been a story about moving forward in spite of seemingly insurmountable odds to me. The first 2 scenes we see in episode 1 convey this feeling perfectly. The episode begins with Berthold showing up to ruin everyone's day, while most people within the walls struggle to even understand what's happening. After 100 years of peace, I would imagine that most civilians have never even seen a Titan, let alone a 50-meter skinless Titan. Which is why, at the end of the episode, when we see the rest of the scene, chaos and panic ensue as the severity of the situation sets in. This is then contrasted by our introduction to the Survey Corps. Hanji, Irvin and Shades are on a mission outside of the walls where they are facing a Titan, and there's a sense of competence and control to the situation, which shows us that there's a way to fight back despite the Titan's size advantage. It's just a matter of being determined and skilled enough to do so. This theme of complacency versus action in spite of the odds permeates the entire season, and these first 2 scenes do a great job of establishing just that. Then we transition to the opening, and this is probably a good time to mention that I'll be ranking each opening and ending as we reach them. This ranking will just be based on how much I like them, so I won't try to make an objective list, but I'll still try to factor in whether the visuals tell an interesting story or reveal anything new about what's going on in this part of the show. Obviously, I'll also consider how good the song is, but that's subjective anyway. So for opening 1, I know that this is gonna feel like blasphemy to some people, but I don't like the first opening all that much anymore. It's kinda overplayed at this point, just like Tokyo Ghoul's first opening. But I don't think that it's a bad opening, and I understand why it's as popular as it is, with how recognizable and distinct it feels from other anime openings. But in terms of visuals, there's nothing really interesting going on. It's just a short summary of the first 3 arcs without adding anything interesting to that summary. The first shot is of the main cast looking sad on a battlefield, about all of the comrades they lost along the way, I assume, followed by some spooky shots of Titans as they enter Shiganshina. Then we see Eren and Co joining the military, some stylized images from the manga. Side note, this kinda reminds me of the way Marvel designs their intros, and I wonder if it's an intentional reference. Followed by the wall breaking a second time, but this time it's enforced and they're ready to fight back. The rest of the opening is just them fighting the Titans, ending with Eren approaching the Colossal Titan. It's certainly an accurate summary, but there's nothing interesting or new being revealed in this opening like they did in the third ending, for example. Which is why I think that it's just alright, and I'm going to put it in 4th place. Side note, there was a tie between 2 openings, which is why there's only 6 spots in this ranking. I'll reveal the rest of the openings once we get there. But now, back to the episode. The opening is followed by the first scene with Eren, and there's some immediate foreshadowing for the Attack Titan's power, since Eren sees glimpses of the incoming attack and what's about to happen to his mother. He even wakes up with tears in his eyes but doesn't remember why, so that means that he's been seeing glimpses of his future self's memories from the very beginning. This even comes up again in episode 9, when he talks about seeing visions and just knowing how to use the Titan's power despite no one explaining it to him. But I always thought that it's weird that he started seeing these visions before receiving the Attack Titan, since that happens in episode 2. But these visions could also just be memories that Eren sent to himself using the Founding Titan's power, once he's able to fully utilize it in the finale. Also, this scene is an anime original, since Eren dreams about Mikasa saying "see you later" to him in the manga, which is what she said to him in chapter 138, when she delivers the final blow to him. I really like both versions of this moment, but I prefer the manga's version, because in the anime we get the payoff for this moment at the end of the first episode, when the things he saw in his nightmare or future memory actually come true. But we also get a second aha moment when we learn about the Attack Titan's power to see the memories of its future and past holders in season 3, since it recontextualizes all of these visions that Eren had seen up until that point. But in the manga, it creates a tragic full circle moment for those who read it again after finishing it, which just hits a lot harder because it implies that Eren has gone through everything that happens in the show several times, searching for a way to break the cycle of violence that doesn't end with him killing 80% of humanity and forcing the people closest to him to kill him. Next we are introduced to Hannes and the other soldiers who have grown complacent and lazy due to the peace within the walls. Like, this dude invites two 10-year-olds to drink with him, like he's obviously not taking his job very seriously. He also says that he's pretty sure that none of the Titans could do anything about the 50-meter walls. He then mentions reinforcing the wall. This never made sense to me since the walls are made of hardened titans. Of course it makes sense that the wall erodes over time, but that makes me think that the soldiers who are in charge of reinforcing the wall would see glimpses of the titans inside like we did in season 2. Afterwards we see the aftermath of the scouts' fight during the beginning of the episode. While the scene we saw earlier almost felt triumphant, this scene confronts us with the harsh reality of Attack on Titan's world. It makes you wonder if fighting back is even worth it if you could just stay within the safety of the walls and avoid all of these casualties. According to Shadis, they haven't even managed to learn anything new or noteworthy about the Titans, so he blames himself for getting soldiers killed for nothing. He probably decided to leave the scouts shortly after this, as the next time we see him in episode 3, he's an instructor for the cadets and also bald. I look like Ray Allen. But Eren doesn't care at all. He still wants to join the scouts and he even attacks a dude for talking badly about them. Which leads to Mikasa asserting dominance by grabbing Eren, pulling him into an alleyway and effortlessly throwing him against the wall. He even got some airtime. She then asks him if what they saw made him change his mind about the scout regiment, which makes what she did even funnier, like she could have just asked him without potentially killing him. Then we get to see Grisha for the first time. He promises Eren to show him what's in the basement when he's back, just to basically never come back again. He does show up one more time in a short scene of him hurrying back after stealing the Founding Titan, but other than that it's mostly flashbacks and a dreamlike sequence in the next episode. Also, it's just funny to me how Mikasa looks really annoyed about Grisha encouraging Eren instead of convincing him to do something else. Then Armin gets his introduction as he's being bullied for being interested in the outside world. I liked the bit with the bullies only being scared once they see Mikasa and Eren thinking that they were scared of him. Interestingly, Armin refuses when Eren tries to help him get up afterwards, which shows us how much he dislikes being a burden to others, and this part of his character becomes more and more apparent over the course of these first few arcs. The next example isn't even that far away in episode 4. The three of them hang out, and just as their conversation goes to the subject of the safety within the walls, it happens. This scene was peak. We already know where it's going due to the beginning of the episode, but it still manages to build up and then release a lot of tension with some beautiful animation to boot. The sense of scale of the destruction, the genuinely terrifying looking titans approaching, and the confusion of the civilians slowly turning into terror as they realize what's going on are all, excuse the overused meme, but absolute cinema. Eren realizes that his house with his mother inside might have been hit by the rubble, so he and Mikasa start heading for it while Armin tries to stop them, but he's too scared to follow them and head towards the Titans, which is honestly understandable. But then he ruins the tension by screaming about something that's obvious and doesn't need to be said for the audience to know it. Like, yeah bro, we know, we have eyes, we see what's happening. This is also the second scene that's very melodramatic, and it kind of just ruins the tension for me instead of adding onto it, which is probably what they intended, but it just really falls flat. Eren and Mikasa find Carla stuck under the remains of their house and try to free her to no avail while they're being approached by a specific Titan that actually has a surprising amount of relevance in the story. But there's a small inconsistency because she should be blonde. The next time we see her, her hair is grey, and I think that the grey hair is an attempt by Wit Studio to retroactively fix the mistake of not making the Smiling Titan's hair blonde, by implying that the hair color of Titans changes over time. The manga left it up to interpretation, and they had no way of knowing about this Titan's hair color being relevant later on, so I don't really blame them for this, but the solution doesn't actually work that well if you think about it. For example, if a Titan's hair color changes as it ages, then Ymir's Titan's hair color should have also been grey, or at least a different color than brown, since she's been a Titan for 60 years, which is a lot longer than Grisha's ex-wife, aka the Smiling Titan, since she's only been a Titan for about 18 years. Props to Carla for staying calm and prioritizing her children's safety over her own by telling them to immediately abandon her. Of course they refuse, so she lies about her legs being broken under the rubble to force them to leave her behind, and they still refuse. Then Hannes shows up and he's determined to save all three of them. In an attempt to make up for his lack of diligence, he charges the approaching Titan, but he freezes as soon as he gets a good look at it. He then changes his mind and instead runs away while carrying Eren and Mikasa, which Carla is actually thankful for while simultaneously being scared and sad about being abandoned. Carla's death was a great scene that not only made us sympathize with her for trying to save the kids, regardless of what happens to her, it also does a good job of making the Titans seem like an insurmountable threat that most humans don't stand a chance against, since Hannes made the right decision by just running away from it. It's very likely that he would have just died if he tried to fight it, which would have led to the deaths of Eren, Mikasa and Carla as well. Also, he does actually fight it the next time he sees it, and he just immediately dies, so yeah. That was the right call, Hannes, good job. Also, Carla's death is the only time we see a pure Titan intentionally kill a human before eating it. Maybe because she was struggling too much, but Titans usually don't care that much about humans struggling while being eaten, so maybe she was just jealous of Grisha's new wife? Who knows? So, this episode was, sorry to use it again, but it was absolute cinema. It used a writing trope that I'm not particularly fond of, at least when it's implemented badly, which is the plot triggering death, which means that a character's death early on in the story becomes the driving force behind the main character's actions. When done badly, it can feel cheap and turn into fridging. There are so many shows where the audience knows nothing about the character who died, but the show or movie still expects us to care about their death for some reason. Like in Jujutsu Kaisen, for example, when Gege realized that most people won't care that much if Kugisaki dies. So he tried to quickly force character depth by doing a flashback to her sad backstory moments before she dies. Stuff like that just feels cheap and a bit lazy, since Gege didn't bother developing her character until it was basically too late to do so. Which is why Kugisaki's death just felt like a moment that was supposed to break Yuji down mentally so that he can bounce back later on, instead of being the conclusion to her character arc. Carla's death might seem very similar to Kugisaki's death, but the key difference here is how much time we got to spend with them before they die. Kugisaki was there from the beginning, showing up in episode 2 and being part of the main group until episode 43, which means that we knew her for 41 episodes. Despite that, her death felt like it wasn't even about her, which is why it feels like fridging to me. Carla, by comparison, had less than an episode before she died, but still managed to leave more of an impact on the main cast as well as the audience, while Kugisaki's death just gets ignored by basically everyone in Jujutsu Kaisen. Also, I do know that she comes back later, but I feel like that just makes her death even worse. Like, she got killed off to serve as character development for Yuji, got ignored for 99% of the rest of the manga, just to show up for one chapter at the very end, revealing that she was alive that entire time, doing nothing apparently. We didn't get to spend a lot of time with Carla, but her final moments showed us her strength of character. Choosing to tell Hannes to take the kids and run, instead of gambling on Hannes being able to actually kill Dina, so that she could be saved as well. This made her death feel like a heroic self-sacrifice, which was more than enough to make Eren's oath for vengeance in episode 2 feel earned. This episode did a good job of introducing the world and characters while also ending on a tragic and character-defining moment for Eren. As everyone who's already watched the show knows, this is the moment that becomes the foundation for everything he does in the finale. He even retroactively makes sure that it happens, even if he does so with a heavy heart. Episode 2 starts off with human history from the point of view of the people of Paradis, which transitions into the opening, followed by the aftermath of the wall breaking down, and an anime-only scene of a priest quoting Dante's Inferno, which is a neat reference as well as a very fitting comparison between the literal hell of Dante's Inferno versus the figurative hell that the residents of Shiganshina are going through. Like Eren, for example. He just lost his mother in a way that was entirely preventable due to the garrison not being prepared to do their job. Which makes this crash out incredibly valid, and I'm honestly surprised that he calmed down so quickly after Hannes saying that he simply didn't have the courage to save her. But it's not just Hannes who's the problem, it's all of the soldiers, because they seem completely unprepared for actual combat. This isn't much of a fight, it's more like a desperate scramble to hold the Titans off, which as we're about to see, doesn't work out so well. Also, I've noticed that none of the soldiers are using ODM gear to fight. The only instance we've seen so far of someone using ODM gear is Hannes when he arrives to save Carla, and even in that situation, he's only using it for traversal, not for combat. This just goes to show that Eren was onto something when he called them out on their laziness in episode 1, since it seems like none of them kept up with their ODM training. We also get a quick tease of Mikasa's backstory as she remembers the death of her first family and says, it's happening again. Also, it's kind of fucked up that the walls are designed to use smaller cities as bait, but hey, as long as it works, right? Oh, alright. Then we get the introduction of the Armor Titan, and it's crazy to think that that's a 12-year-old boy. But it's also an odd plot hole because as far as I can remember, they never explained why they used 12-year-olds for such an important mission. Of course it makes sense that children are easier to control for Marley, but they're also a lot more likely to be influenced by their environment, which is exactly what happens to Reiner, for example. Sending adults just would have made a lot more sense, since they're more likely to stay loyal, and also would have had a lot more time to increase their efficiency in combat. I think that the only reason for them being 12 is that Isayama wanted them to be around Eren's age, so that it wouldn't be odd for them to be cadets and join the scouts, along with the rest of the main cast, except Annie. But I think that it just creates an illogical scenario, especially considering that Falco's brother was supposed to receive the Beast Titan at 18, which makes a lot more sense. The only justification that I can think of is Marley transferring the Titans as soon as the previous shifter is nearing the end of their term, since they wouldn't be able to wait until the child soldiers grow up. But even that doesn't really make sense, considering that there's no way that their best alien soldiers are 12-year-olds. Surely there's capable adult soldiers who could inherit the Titan instead of literal children. And I gotta say, they really put a lot of effort into making most of the Titans as scary as possible. The introductions of the Shifter Titans present them as an unstoppable, dread-inducing force that's beyond the understanding of the characters, as well as the viewers. I kinda miss that in the later seasons. Titans become less and less threatening as the story goes on, which is not necessarily criticism, since keeping up the atmosphere of an incomprehensible and insurmountable threat wouldn't have worked throughout the entire show. Especially once we start learning about their origins and the motivations of the Shifter Titans, which kinda makes them lose their incomprehensible aspect. But the mystery of the Titans' unexplained malice or hatred towards the human race was always something that I found very interesting about the earlier seasons. Fun fact, one of the important people, mostly politicians I assume, discussing the Broken Wall is Zemo Reeves. He shows up again in a few episodes and also plays a big role in season 3. I never noticed that he shows up as early as episode 2. Eren's aforementioned Oath for Vengeance is another example of a human refusing to surrender to the Titans, who instead chooses to fight back, just like the Survey Corps does during the first scene in episode 1. This refusal to back down and accept being terrorized by Titans is why he's such a great fit for the Survey Corps. And the scene also contains a very important bit of characterization for Eren, as this was the first glimpse of who he becomes later on in the story. Then we get a dreamlike sequence of Grisha administering the spinal fluid to Eren so that he can pass down the attack and Founding Titan, but he's weirdly hostile towards Eren. For example, he says, "Shut up and show me your arm," when Eren asks what he's trying to do. I think that he's acting this way because he blames Eren for indirectly causing Carla's death, by withholding the memories that reveal what happens to her, until it was too late to do anything about it. He clearly doesn't care for Eren's emotional well-being in the scene, as the only explanation he offers is, "It's for your own good." Also, why does Mikasa think it's impossible that Eren saw Grisha? Is he assumed to be dead for some reason? I guess Grisha took Eren to a remote place so that no one would see the transformations and Eren came back by himself afterwards, but it makes no sense for Mikasa to assume that Grisha is dead, unless she thinks that Eren killed him. Also, Annie appears for a split second. And another important bit of characterization for Eren, as well as Armin, is that he, a 10-year-old, tries to fight 2 adult soldiers for speaking ill of the refugees. He tends to lose himself to his anger and resort to violence in situations like these, which could get him killed if he's unlucky. Fortunately, he's actually very lucky because Armin and Mikasa, in this case it's Armin, but it's usually Mikasa, tend to save him when he acts like this. He even gets a nickname later on for this type of behavior, and it's exactly this type of behavior that gets a lot of people killed when he's in a life-threatening situation as a soldier for the first time. Armin steps in to save Eren by apologizing for him and making up an excuse for him, and this is the first time we see Armin demonstrate his level-headed approach to combat situations. Eren, feeling frustrated by his inability to do anything about the soldiers, lashes out at Armin instead, claiming that he will go back and kill all the Titans by himself. This time Mikasa steps in, calling him out on his hypocrisy, as he, just like Armin, is unable to survive on his own, let alone do anything about the Titans. She convinces him that just surviving should be their only priority right now, and then we get a second appearance of Reiner and Berthold. Mikasa, Armin and Eren all decide to join the Cadet Corps, and that's the end of episode 2. But don't think that I forgot about ranking the endings. I definitely didn't almost forget. Anyway, y'all are going to hate me for this one too, because I can see and appreciate what this ending is doing, hinting at Mikasa's backstory with this beautiful hand-drawn art style and a very fitting song about Attack on Titan's cool and yet beautiful world. And despite all of that, I never really liked it all that much. I don't hate it either, but I guess the song not being my cup of tea prevents me from enjoying this ending more than most of the other endings, which is why I'm going to put it in 6th place. Hello, and thank you for making it to the end of the video. This part is unscripted, so I might be rambling a little bit. But yeah, I've been working on this video for the past couple of months, and I definitely took a little longer than I should have. But it's out now and I'm happy with it, and considering that you made it to the end of the video, I assume that you're happy with it as well. Yeah, the next video should be out within the next month, I hope, but no promises on that. Yeah, stick around and subscribe and all that, activate the bell, leave a comment. My scene partner got bored of me. I mean, he really likes the video as well because he has great taste, and he is just going to write a comment. You know, that's the comment. Yeah, subscribe, leave a comment, activate the bell, do all the YouTube stuff so that I can make money, I guess. And have a nice day. Bye bye.